How's it going, my bakers? I hope you're having a wonderful day. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I decided to make 100% whole wheat baguettes, and they came out pretty well, so let's go to the kitchen and check them out. You can find a couple of baguette videos on my channel already, but I had never tried making a 100% whole wheat version. Lately I've been trying to convert a lot of recipes to whole wheat, and I thought baguettes would be the perfect candidate for it. They use the same exact principles as regular baguettes, so if you have made baguettes before, you'll be able to make these too. All I did was swap the white flour for whole wheat and increase the hydration to 80%. They came out slightly heavy, but they're still nice and soft. And you can of course play around with hydration to tweak them to your liking. I think you could easily push the hydration to about 85%. So let's get right to it and see how they're made. First off, ingredients. We'll need some whole wheat flour, yeast, salt and water. The whole wheat flour that I'm using has a protein content of 13%. As for the equipment, we'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, and we'll need something to slash the baguettes with, ideally a razor on a lame. This little handle ensures that the blade is curved, and it is with a curved blade that you can get those distinct cuts on a baguette, called ears. If you don't have a handle like this, you can use a chopstick or a skewer. Even a piece of a popsicle stick may work. Next up, we'll need something to ferment the baguettes on. In professional bakeries, they would use something called a couche. It is a thick piece of linen cloth, in between the folds of which you can ferment baguettes and other breads. It ensures that the bread keeps its shape as it's proofing. But at home we can use a thick kitchen towel. It works exactly the same way, and you don't need a special piece of equipment. Another thing that is used in bakeries is called a peel. It is a piece of wood that is used for moving the baguettes from the couche to the oven. It ensures that the baguettes don't get distorted. I made this peel from 2 thick pieces of paper. You could make yours out of a piece of cardboard or even wood. As long as you can pick up a baguette with it, anything goes really. I will be using my pizza peel for sliding the baguettes in the oven. You can use a flat tray or cookie sheet for this too. I'll also use a piece of non-stick paper for sliding them off more easily. Now when we bake baguettes we need steam, and a great way for creating steam is by preheating a heavy pan and then pouring boiling water into it. It'll create a cloud of steam. It'll keep the crust of the baguettes moist, it'll make them puff up more, and it will make the crust a lot crispier. If you don't own a cast iron pan like this one, there are alternatives. Just use the thickest, heaviest baking tray that you have. There's one last thing that's extremely important. We need a solid base to bake on. I'm going to use my pizza steel, you can use a pizza stone, or use a heavy metal tray. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's start making our baguettes. And it all starts with a pre-ferment. We'll take part of the water, part of the yeast, and part of the flour of the recipe, mix it all together, and then leave it to ferment overnight. This will bring out heaps of flavor in our baguettes, and it will give them a great texture as well. We're using a very tiny amount of yeast here, just a pinch, which is 0.1 of a gram. That is more than enough to make it ferment overnight. If you are new to pre-ferments, check out my video about them in the Principles of Baking playlist. There are a few different pre-ferments that can be used, and they all achieve slightly different results. This is a low hydration pre-ferment, and I chose it because it's going to ferment slightly more slowly. Whole wheat flour can ferment quite rapidly, so this is a good way for slowing it down. You want to leave this pre-ferment for around 10 to 12 hours. Normally I make it in the evening and it's ready by the morning. If you're not ready to bake yet, you can put this in the fridge and use it later, which is what I did actually. But let's move on with the main dough. I'm using cold water because I'm kneading this dough by hand. It's gonna warm up, and my kitchen's pretty warm right now too. Okay, so grab a large bowl, add the water, the yeast, the salt and the pre-ferment. Using your hands, tear up the pre-ferment into little pieces and drop it into the water. The only reason for breaking it up into little pieces is to make the mixing process easier. Once you have added the pre-ferment, give it all a good mix. You want to dissolve the salt and hydrate the yeast. And once you have mixed everything up, add the final ingredient, the remaining flour. Then grab your dough scraper and mix this to a dough. Mix it in the bowl until there's no more dry flour left. And if the scraper is not doing the job, continue on by hand. Now at a hydration of 80%, this dough is quite loose and stretchy and sticky. So we're going to be using the slap and fold kneading method for this. And the way it works is that you pick the dough up by one side, turn it 90 degrees, then stretch it against the table towards yourself and fold it over forwards. And then repeat. Pick, turn, stretch, fold. It will be quite sticky, but don't get discouraged. We have to knead this dough for around 10 minutes. So once in a while, every couple minutes or so, stop, scrape it all together and then continue. It'll become less and less sticky as you keep going. Once the 10 minutes are up, the dough should be nice and cohesive. But you always want to wet your hands with water when handling dough like this, because it will still be quite sticky. That's just the nature of whole wheat flour. As you can see, the dough is nice and strong. When I pull it, it resists. Now let's get this dough in a bowl and take its temperature. Around 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit is just about right for this. If yours is warmer, it'll ferment more rapidly. If it's cooler, it'll take longer. But if it's just right, cover it up and leave it for 45 minutes. After the first 45 minutes of fermentation, we'll give this dough a quick fold. And I decided on a slightly different method this time. Of course, I wet my hands with water, then I pick the dough up, I push the sides down and up into the middle. Do this a few times until the dough ball is nice and tight. This is an unconventional method, but it works. I was going to do a coil fold initially, but this dough is not stretchy enough for that. If you are going to increase the hydration of this, then a coil fold would be the way to go. And instead of just doing one fold, I would say do 2 folds. And in that case, you want 30-minute intervals. But back to our recipe, the dough goes back into the bowl for another 45 minutes of fermentation. Now the bulk fermentation is done, we can divide this dough into 2. Dust your dough with flour, get your scales, get your scraper, release the dough from the bowl, take it out, weigh it, and then divide it in half. You always want to weigh your dough, because eyeballing it is not good enough. You will never get a perfect half that way. After dividing this dough, we need to pre-shape it. Because the baguettes are going to be rolled out lengthways, we should do the pre-shaping in a way that will make the final shaping easier. So instead of shaping the dough into rounds, we'll shape it into kind of oblong cylinder shapes. So flatten the dough, cross the 2 sides over in the middle, and then roll it up. And you don't want to do this too tight. This dough has to relax before the final shaping, and the tighter you roll it, the longer you'll have to rest. Dust your table with some flour so they don't stick, and dust the top of the dough too. Now cover it and leave it to rest for 15 minutes. Final shaping is perhaps the most crucial part when making baguettes, so watch closely. Give the dough a light dusting of flour, then place it on the table with the smooth side down. Our job here is to create tension. First up, flatten the dough slightly, and then fold the top third down. If you ever feel that your hands are sticking, rub them against the table in some flour. Once you have folded the dough, turn it around and repeat the same step. Now turn it around again. From here, you want to use the index finger and the thumb on one hand and the heel of the other hand. Using the 2 fingers, fold the dough back and tuck it into itself, and use the heel of your hand to seal it up. So roll the dough back with your index finger and push it in with your thumb, and follow with your other hand to seal up the seam. Once you have gone the whole length, turn the dough around and repeat. This takes some coordination and practice, but once you do it a few times, it'll become quite easy. The final thing to do is to roll the baguettes out to the correct length. Now these are demi baguettes, so they're pretty short anyway. I didn't have to roll them much at all, I just tapered off the ends. But that's how you shape a baguette. Of course, I'm no baguette shaping master. It takes a lot of practice to get these perfect, but the more we practice, the better we get. And if your first one was quite wonky, you can try and redeem yourself on the next one. After shaping the baguettes, we need to place them on the couche, aka the old kitchen towel. You want to dust it with flour. As you can see, mine is already floured. It's because I use it all the time. You want to place your baguette with the seam side up. Then create a crease in your couche, then place the second baguette next to it. You can cover your baguettes with the cloth, but I will be covering mine with some plastic wrap so that you can see how they rise. And I'm dusting the bottoms with some flour so that the plastic wrap doesn't stick. We'll leave these for the final proof, which will take around 45 to 60 minutes. During this time you want to preheat your oven to 250 degrees Celsius, fan off. And of course preheat your baking steel, pizza stone or whatever you're using. These are puffed up beautifully, now they're ready for the oven. And we'll be using our handy little peel for moving them from the couche to the baking paper. This is very simple, just watch my hands. We want the baguettes to be upside down now. So place your peel next to the baguette, and then using the towel, roll it onto the peel, and then slide the baguette onto the paper. There's just one more step left before baking, which is scoring. And this is quite an important step. And it does take some skill and some practice. You want to imagine that there's a 1-inch wide line going down the baguette, and then make sure that your cuts are within the borders of that line. So don't cut the baguettes across, cut them almost straight down. And make sure that every cut overlaps by about a third. And again, I'm no master at this, but this is acceptable, I would say. Now let's get these bad boys in the oven. And as soon as they go in, pour in half a cup of boiling water in your pan. And please be careful, this is pretty dangerous. As soon as you close the door, turn the temperature to 210 degrees and bake the baguettes for around 22 minutes. And once your baguettes are golden brown all over, they're ready. That's how you make whole wheat baguettes, or at least these whole wheat baguettes. As I said in the beginning, the same principles apply to white flour baguettes. The pre-shaping, the final shaping, the final proof, the scoring, the steaming, the baking, the equipment, it's all important. And don't expect perfect baguettes on your first try. It's just not gonna happen. So what do you think this recipe? Have you ever tried 100% whole wheat baguettes? Do let me know down in the comments. To see more videos like this one, click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.